Contrasting Viewpoints with Ray Sclafani and Mark Hurley.
Ray has been one of the leading consultants in the financial services industry for many years, and Mark has annoyed countless people throughout the wealth management industry over the last 25 years with the white papers he has written. Today, they are going to provide their insights into what is really going on in the industry, some of the more absurd things they've seen, and also for anyone in this industry, some issues they should be thinking about as they try to build their business.
All right. Once again, Mark, it's great to be back with you.
Great to be with you too.
Okay, so we have an exciting episode today. We're going to talk about Supreme Court rulings on the Jarkessi case. We've got another great example of the welcome to the jungle thinking. What's going on at Mariner. Also, a bigger example, let's move over to Abu Dhabi and Fisher Investments. Big time talk about welcome to the jungle. A little a funny aspect of remote work, but a bigger serious issue about how to keep and retain and develop top talent. The impact of AI, you've got to be kidding me, scorching multiples out there, and our main discussion, cybersecurity. What do you say we get into it?
Let's go.
Okay, first off, let's talk about the significant constraint and the power in regulation and the shifting that's going on. The Supreme Court curbs the SEC in-house judges in fraud cases reported by wealthmanagement.com. This is a potential earthquake with the Jarkessi case. What's your take as a former regulator?
Yeah, as a former regulator, we always had outsized power because there was a ruling in 1984 called Chevron, which effectively the court said that the federal court should defer to the regulators in how to interpret laws where there's any ambiguity. As a consequence, the way they would do it is they would bring an enforcement action against somebody and fine them or whatever they're to do. But they only had to convince an in-house employee, an administrative judge, that what they were doing was reasonable. And you think about how much power that gives the regulator. They're not worried about in front of a jury of your peers or a federal judge. They're worried about, well, I was like, if it's the guy down the hallway, we'll be okay. The court said, no, everyone has a right to a trial. And I don't even think the regulators have figured out what this fully means for them. This is an earthquake.
What does it mean for a financial advisor running a wealth management business?
Well, for a typical wealth manager, it doesn't mean that much for them personally, just because, one, you never want to get in a fight with the SEC. Unlimited discovery power, unlimited resources. That's not a fight you want to get into. But what will be interesting is the next time they bring a major enforcement action against some big organization in some area that's a bit gray when it comes to the law. Because that was where it'll show up. That was where it'll show up.
So an advisor should be paying attention to what's happening in the marketplace, pay attention to what market counsel might be writing about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you just have to be very prepared to understand that there's been a shift, but still, this really involves the cases that are not black and white. These are the gray ones.
Okay, got it. So to be sure, the government does have unlimited resources and can make somebody's life miserable if they are, in fact.
For years.
So once again, when an advisor thinks about sort of the black and the white, right and wrong, and goes right down the middle on what's gray, the narrower the gray, the better.
That's right.
Okay, I'm clear. Your white paper, Welcome to the Jungle, pointed out quite a number of changes that an RIA should expect over the next decade and over the next 5 years in particular. Mariner was sued, is now suing. This is part of that Welcome to the Jungle collegial sort of environment where everybody got together and shared ideas, but that seems to be changing in a world where finding top talent is tough.
Right. There's a shortage of talent. The industry is shrinking. I like to jokingly call it a shrinking geriatric ward. Very old, and it's getting smaller as we go along.
I'm sure we'll get some hate mail for that.
Thank you. And it takes so long to get somebody who can actually do the function as opposed to the technical skills that it's going to take a long time for this shortage is resolved. So where do you get talent from? Well, there's an enormous organic growth opportunity. There's 7 million more Americans between the ages of 45 and 60 than are 60 to 75, which means the industry's number of clients is likely more to double over the next 10 to 15 years. But if you don't have the talent, you can't take advantage of this. You run up to Jolly Roger and you go steal the talent. Marty, who I think is a phenomenal businessman, and it was great because he did that 2 days after we published the paper. He got sued by Edelman, and then he got sued by someone else a couple of weeks later for stealing talent. Now he's suing other people for stealing his talent. But this is going to become the norm.
This is part of the jungle.
Everybody's going to be suing everybody.
So last year, the industry hit for the first time ever a net loss of advisors. coming in versus leaving the industry. And as Cerulli reports, over the next decade, there'll be lots more advisors exiting the business than
37% is what he projects.
So other than Northwestern Mutual and Edward Jones, who seem to be the last two firms on an aggressive tear hiring top talent, what's an advisor to do besides poaching from others?
It's quite hard, quite difficult. I think that the good news is that if you have an independent advisor, you should have an attractive offer to get people and also to keep your people. Remember, the first rule of the jungle is not to get eaten. And then the second thing is these very large aggregators, I believe, are going to start recruiting people and running training programs. They're going to have to.
So finding talent should be at the absolute top of the list. It's funny, at ClientWise, we see the number one hire that independent advisors and RIAs are making after they make that COO hire is a chief people officer, a CPO. Anybody with a SHRM designation, either the introductory designation or the advanced designation, are candidates for the CPO. But recruiting is a full-time job. Developing top talent is a full-time job. And having dedicated resources focused on your people seems to be paramount.
Right. That we are in a pie eating contest. There is so much potential clients to be gotten. And they're each worth a lot of money. And quite candidly, the marginal cost versus the present value of the cash flows, the marginal cost is de minimis compared to what the present value is. Now, at some point, that's going to correct. So it's a land grab.
Although between now and 2045, the greatest wealth transfer this country has ever seen is coming.
I'm more skeptical, as I often am, and it's because all the longevity numbers are based on statistics that are overweighted to declines in infant mortality. Laura Carstensen wrote a great book on this called The Long Bright Future, and about 70% of the increases in longevity that are showing up today in the projections are from declines in infant mortality, not new drugs, better lifestyles, all these other things we have going. And her argument, she's argued in different cases that if you make it 60 now, you probably got about a 50-50 shot of seeing 100. So a lot of that wealth that's going to be transferred is going to be consumed, and it probably be transferred a lot more slowly than people are thinking.
I like your contrarian view. I appreciate that very much. And I'm a reader of the old Harry Dent books. He's now calling for the market decline, but he did write about the Dow 40,000. And he did talk about the greatest wealth transfer. He got that part right.
It'll be interesting. I think, though, the biggest opportunity, the easiest opportunity to capitalize on is just the floods of new clients coming in.
No doubt. Okay, let's move on to the next story. This one comes out of FA Magazine. Fisher Investments, it probably is the highlight story of the month because there's such a great asset in a firm like Fisher. They're growing like nobody's business, maybe the top leading RIA in terms of growth. You can't go far without seeing a commercial, and every advisor I talk to is competing head-to-head with Fisher, at least for asset management and investment management. So this is interesting to me because they sold 20% private equity to Advent International, which is the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, the ADIA, for between $2.5 and $3 billion. Now, you talked about this on our previous episode. It seems like this is the first of many. It's the disintermediation of PE funds. And with the flood of PE money entering this marketplace, this is maybe the early sign of long life capital or some other partner, sovereign funds, sovereign debt coming into the marketplace. What's your take on what's going on here?
Well, first off, most of the PE money is coming from the sovereign funds themselves already. So you're really just talking about the same owner, but with different packaging. What the sovereign funds have noticed is that the PE firms are collecting enormous management fees, and then when the investment matures, they sell it to another one of their own funds, and so they get even more management fees. And at some point, they're gonna. And these are very smart people who run these organizations. ADIA, I think it's close to $1 trillion.
It's monster.
But you've got other ones. You got Qatar's got one. You've got Saudis have one.
Norway, Kuwait, Singapore.
Yeah, well, one. Yeah, and the real question that I think is the issue will be is what will investors or customers' reactions be to having the owner of the business, at least openly the owner, as opposed to behind, to be from a country that perhaps has a different set of values regarding some issues that were important to some
because
people in the U.S.
Abu Dhabi didn't shy away from this. They were transparent.
They didn't even attempt to hide it, which I thought was the most interesting aspect. Mind you, if it had been Norway or it had been Singapore or the Canadians, it would have been no big deal. But I'll be curious to see what attention is brought to the fact that it's coming from a country that has a different approach to a lot of things than many people in the U.S. are comfortable with.
So should we expect more of these sovereigns in this approach? I think yes. It's long life.
We predicted it, and I believe it's going to ultimately, they will be the owners of most of the aggregators.
Is this good for the aggregators?
Oh, it's great. And the reason being is that, as I mentioned, the real opportunity is organic growth. Organic growth takes a long time and needs very patient capital. The sovereign funds, they think in terms of 30, 40 years. They want to put money to work. It's a growth market. It's stable. They would be delighted to make an investment and not sell it for 50 years. And instead, PE firms, you're talking 3 or 5 years, and I got to flip it, and they're worried about this valuation or that. Very different set of dynamics. This will be particularly important, in my view, to those aggregators that have yet to rationalize their acquisitions.
Okay,
that's going to require a lot of patience.
So let's move on from a rather serious story, but something to watch in sovereigns, to kind of a silly story, and that is Financial Planning Magazine reporting that Wells Fargo fired wealth managers on hybrid schedules over faking work.
Yes. Working remotely is great if the people are working.
Yeah. So the challenges of remote productivity. So it's a funny story, but it's one that gets everybody's attention because there is a shift to remote work, accelerated by the pandemic. But the FINRA home office rules have now been implemented. It looks like the end of the COVID Pandemic Relief Act ended May 31st. New enforcement acts went into place July of this month, which is a 3-year pilot program for remote inspections that are beginning now. And so this signals kind of an interesting change to why employees want to work at a particular firm, whether flex work is here to stay or not. I'm hearing from advisors that they're having to think about a flex work environment in order to attract and retain top talent. And we just spent a couple of minutes talking about the challenge that Mariner and others are having finding top talent. What's your take on this story?
Well, look, if you live near a major city, let's say northern New Jersey, and you had a commute to New York, it'd take you 4 hours each day, total. LA is the same thing. I mean, remote work is here to stay. It's a critical aspect. How you manage it's going to be a challenge. But think of this. Let's say you have 100 employees working remotely. What that effectively means, you are now responsible for 100 more offices. You're responsible for their cybersecurity. You're responsible for their behavior. I mean, this is a major leap in complexity for management. And I think people haven't fully figured out how we're going to do this. From a cybersecurity standpoint, as we'll talk about in a minute, the 82% of all breaches of financial services companies in a recent study came from employees working remotely.
I know advisors, we'll talk about here in a moment, about whether or not they're paying attention to cyber in the way that they need to be in a serious fashion. But what I hear from advisors more frequently is productivity. How to support and train and develop the next gen, whether the next gen is actually getting the kind of mentorship and guidance that they might if they were actually in an office. Those quick side conversations, that quick feedback from a collaborative perspective may or may not be happening. But what I'm noticing is that advisors who are using some cloud-based system in order to engage employees through communication like Slack or Microsoft Teams, whether they're using tools like 155.com, which allow them to keep track of some of the objectives and key results of employees and the check-ins and one-on-one meetings. Those are the individuals who are leading great firms and surviving and thriving with flex workplace because they don't have to compete for talent in a local zip code. They can actually think more broadly. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, there was a study done, I forget when it was, back around the time of the pandemic, and they found that the emotional connection, when you have the video component, was like so much higher than if you just were on a phone call. And that's really important in dealing with clients on Zoom calls. But we've gotten to an environment now nationally where people, quite candidly, would prefer not to meet in person if they don't have to. The big challenge you touched on, though, which is how do you manage, monitor, develop, train talent? You have your senior people, they know what to do. It's less problematic. But if you aren't able to recruit, train, and develop talent, you've got a very big long-term problem. Remote work's a problem for that. Plus, again, For every time you have somebody working remotely, you now have a host of new responsibilities and obligations and liabilities that come with that person working remotely as the business owner.
There's been a big change we've noticed with the advisors we're coaching, where their first professional manager hire might be a chief of operations, a COO. We're noticing today they're really looking for chief people officers.
Yeah.
The SHRM has a designation. The Society for HR Management has an introductory designation and then an advanced designation around people officer and engaging and recruiting and developing talent. And this people officer is an emerging trend and theme that we're seeing advisors be really serious about, that this is a full-time job. It's not something that they're going to do part-time. It's not something that a chief of operations is going to do part-time. It is a full-time, dedicated effort to being able to be available for all employees so that they feel supported and engaged.
Yeah, technology companies for a long time have had CTOs that are not chief technology officers. They're chief talent officers. Because those businesses, when they need talent, they got to get it. They got to find it and do this. You're right. This whole function is going to become increasingly one of the most critical functions for the most successful firms in our industry.
Years ago, there was a study, why do employees engage and stay, and why would they leave? And there were 4 reasons, and in this order. This is what we observed. Nature of the work. Do they like their job? Are their roles and responsibilities clearly documented, and can we point to and measure performance in role assigned? The second was nature of the workplace. What's the vibe? What's the culture? What's the experience like working at the company? Nature of the relationship with those in charge. And fourth was money, and in that order. And so this article, I think, is really interesting because it points out the fact that talent and the need for talent is here to stay, and the competition. This is another welcome to the jungle exercise.
Yes, it is. You got to get the talent to be competitive. And there's a finite amount of it, so there's going to be an enormous amount. The real war is not going to be for clients; it's for the talent.
For the talent, and we are in the people business. And last I checked, humans really matter. We're not headed to singularity anytime soon. So let's switch gears and talk about AI.
Yes,
you and I, you can't go to a meeting these days and not have somebody throw around AI. Apple Intelligence at their recent conference launched. I have a particular view that AI is truly revolutionizing financial advising by automating tasks, personalizing advice, managing risk. We're seeing advisors be really smart about using AI. And the AI tools seem to be increasingly integrated into everyday operations to provide better and more efficient client service. I don't think you agree with me on this topic the same way. So I'm curious about your take on AI.
One, I think AI is going to have some impact on the industry, but I think it's going to be much more marginally and take longer than people realize. Most of the AI tools you're seeing come out right now are just extensions of existing tools. This notion that you'll have this entirely integrated tech stack with all this AI that thinks for you and makes these decisions, it may happen. It's going to be a long, long time down the road. The biggest reason being, well, 2 biggest reasons. One, AI is insanely expensive. ChatGPT costs $10 billion to develop, and it costs $1 billion a year to maintain. You got to sell a lot of product to justify those kind of expenditures. Bigger reason is that something like ChatGPT is using the whole internet. So it has this enormous database to work from. What we're talking about here is a really narrow set of data on the behavior of specific individuals, what they have done. And there's only a few organizations that actually have that data. I'm sorry. And I doubt they're going to just give it away. In fact, I'm not sure why they'd want to put it out there. People like Schwab, Fidelity, some of the large brokerages.
Well, I got to push back a little bit because Orion integrates AI. I got to push back just a little bit because
Sure.
Orion integrates AI for client engagement, portfolio management. Schwab has their intelligent technologies, which is all AI-driven investment advice. You've got Riskalyze. They employ AI to assist and manage investment risk. Envestnet has Yodely. These are just a few examples, Mark.
Yeah, but let's understand. First off, the service they had before was really great already. It has a marginal improvement, but it's not life-changing. There was a time when there was a big emphasis by physicians for everybody to eat more calcium. So all of a sudden, you virtually saw everything from orange juice to flour, all of them talking about having calcium in them. My view is AI will play some marginal role here, but it's sort of like, hey, we have AI too. That means we're we're good, really good for you.
All right, so I think we'll agree to disagree on this topic because I'm watching advisors use Zoom AI, Otter AI, X AI, People AI, even Clara Labs following up on meetings. There are everyday activities. I mean, listen, the Bill Good guerrilla marketing and the copy talk is game over. I mean, there are new entrants into this marketplace, and there are players that look like Kodak, as far as I can tell.
Well, clearly it's disruptive technology, but keep in mind, the fundamental job of wealth management is to help human beings manage the most complicated relationship in their life, which is their relationship with their money. All this other stuff is at the margin supporting.
That's where we agree. And my take is that the more and more advisors can automate and improve some of the back office operations and to create some efficiency and protect their operating expenses and protect their margins, they're going to have a better shot at running profitable businesses and be able to spend more time working with clients face to face. Let's move on to the main topic, what's coming in cyber. With your digital company, you've done an amazing job launching new services for advisors and their clients. I want to draw attention to the T3 conference. Joel Bruckenstein, I think, is a leader in really understanding what's going on here. He recently held a survey at his conference, and of those willing to participate in the study, 75% of the advisors admitted they've done nothing related to cyber. In fact, number one, I would say cyber criminals have figured out where the money is. It's the old story, go where the money is. The second is advisors seem to be doing and reporting very little here. The SEC is indeed showing up with an opinion and enforcement actions in a proposed rule. So I'm curious what your take is. Is it just data breaches and phishing attacks, or is it something much bigger and nefarious that's happening?
We work with several hundred companies, and it's much, much bigger than just that. What is occurring now is that the cyber criminal community had realized is that wealth managers have two things that they can steal. One is client information, and there's a $54 billion market involving identity theft. SEC put out an update to the rule SP, which now makes it so if you have any information stolen of any consequence, you're going to have to make a major disclosure to everybody. But the real big rule is they proposed rules in April of 2022, which they extended the comment period in August of 2023. And now we're sort of waiting for the rules to go final. They might not, but I'd be surprised because they're consistent with everything else the SEC has done. Now, the rules are going to be truly an earthquake for this industry. They changed the dynamic, for example, of when you have to effectively turn yourself into the SEC if you're breached within 48 hours under the rules. Normally, if you have something you screwed up, you hope the examiners don't catch it the next time they examine you. No, you have to self-report. Secondly, they require every firm to have adequate, they define it as, quote, adequate policies and procedures to prevent breaches. And you have to certify that they're adequate. And if they're not adequate, you should assume you're going to get a commission enforcement action. And actually say this in the proposed rule. I mean, understand this. You get breached, all of a sudden now you're going to have to disclose it to the regulators. You have to promptly disclose it to clients. And then it becomes a permanent part of your record to tell every client, current and future, and prospect. It's like a face tattoo. It's not going to make you look better.
This makes broker check look like tiddlywinks.
And it even goes beyond that. The rules don't differentiate between how you're breached. In other words, yes, everyone thinks that cyber attacks are some guy trying to hack into your computer system. No, the most common way of attacking, the largest attack surface is either through clients or through employees working remotely. By far the easiest way to get in. And I don't know an advisor who has not had an indirect attack like this. And the rules don't care if it's direct or indirect.
Well, the rules also don't care, from my understanding, as to whether the clients get hacked.
Right, that's what I mean. That's part of the indirect. And most clients operate with abysmal personal cybersecurity. A week does not go by where someone doesn't show up on our doorstep who's lost millions of dollars because he's been hacked, trying to get help. And we do what we can. Most times, not much you can do. We can only prevent it happening again. But the way they were hacked was they got into some part of their device or into one of their applications, or they went to their social media and downloaded a video and cloned them. And wealth managers are being victimized by these things because there's now even a YouTube site now where you can create a clone that you can use on Zoom calls. And it looks and sounds and acts like the
What are you
person.
talking?
I mean, so let's say I'm a cyber criminal. I hack into your email. I tell my advisor, I need you to send $1 million to somebody. The advisor says, let's do a Zoom call to make sure it's you.
Not just a phone authentication. Which
And phone's easy to get through.
Voice can be
replicated. $4.95 a month, you can clone a person's voice and defeat voice recognition software. Now, even video stuff, they will show up like this. And so what this all is going to mean for advisors is advisors now have a compelling interest to get their clients to act more responsibly online.
So what you just described for me is a broadening of risk to running a wealth advising firm, that no longer is it just enough to have employees following the VPNs and the password and all of that protection, but this now just extended broadly out to clients.
And also, quite candidly, employees personally. The other way they're attacked is they'll go pose as the employee, the same way they would pose as the client. If you've heard the term deep fakes, this is what people are talking about. But for example, a common attack is to get into somebody's email. With a computer, they can read the emails in seconds, and they'll identify who the advisor is. They'll generate an email that sounds just like the client. It actually talks about stuff from prior emails, and they'll have an infected attachment that, if the advisor clicks on, infects the systems. So I'm working with two other firms, CIC Cyber and Market Counsel, Brian Hamburger, and we're going to publish a protocol for the industry sometime, hopefully in late August, early September, because there's nothing out there.
There's no protocol with that.
Yeah, idea. But one of the things we've concluded is that we think advisors are going to have to do a risk assessment. They're going to have to say, okay, I know this client does this cybersecurity-wise. I feel comfortable. I can open emails and texts. Yes, I got to verify stuff, but they're safer. This other client, I have no idea who I'm talking to. I can't even be sure I can open their emails or text, because that could actually infect my systems and I get breached that way. This is an enormous shift in how people operate. Same thing with employees. How do I know when employees work remotely, it's really the employee I'm dealing with? And the way they will attack is they will go from one employee to another employee, convincing them to do something. It's called social engineering attacks. These are incredibly widespread. Next time you try to get E&O insurance, try to see if you can get it without a social engineering exclusion. Good luck. It can be very expensive.
So give us kind of a roadmap. What are 3 to 5 things you would recommend advisors do right now today?
Well, one, I think they have to start getting very serious and get up the curve. Everybody should read the new rules and understand what their obligations. Example, one of the obligations that everyone's going to have is that you're going to have to disclose the cyber risks that someone has for using your service. And an obvious one is what the firm gets hacked. But a less obvious one is no one can use your services without using a custodian. And all those custodial agreements are breathtakingly one-sided in favor of the custodian when it comes to cyber theft. So you're going to have to sit down with a client who thinks that putting their money in a custodial account is like going to a bank, although banks have the same things that custodial agreements have if you actually read them. And when he's safe, they don't realize if the account gets hacked, they aren't getting their money back. We had a Chase customer lose $360,000. And they said, not our problem. The custodians, this happens a lot. And with the custodians, what they're trying to grapple with is, okay, do we make the client whole? Even though we don't have to, if we make the client whole, if we don't make them whole, they could be on CNN the next day talking about how XYZ money got stolen from my account there and I lost my life savings. What they're increasingly doing is firing the advisor. They will just send a letter to the advisor's client saying, inadequate cybersecurity, go find yourself another advisor. Good luck keeping your clients if that happens.
Yeah, we've had a couple of instances like that. Okay, so that's the first. Get up the learning curve. Tell us what else.
Number 2, you need to start looking at the issue of personal cybersecurity of clients and personal cybersecurity employees. And like anything else in risk, it starts with education. We are conducting cyber classes. I'm doing like 3 or 4 a week for wealth management firms, for the client-facing people to understand who the bad guys are, what the risks their clients face, how the client's going to be attacked. Oh, and by the way, how they're going to be attacked personally, all the same thing, what their obligations are. And then we're separately doing classes for clients. Because if you don't have the education, it doesn't matter what you do, it is not going to work.
Probably the clients and their kids.
Clients and the kids. Kids, it's part of that package. Understand that what you're really trying to get to, and this is really the third thing, is basic cyber hygiene. A classmate of mine from West Point was the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Cyber. And he said that if everybody just did the basic cyber things, 90+% of all crime would go away tomorrow. This involves using sophisticated passwords, unique sophisticated passwords. It involves using a VPN, using a password manager, all this kind of stuff.
How long should the passwords be?
There's a study out by a firm called ChatGPT, which is called Hive. I'm sorry,
HIV.
HIV using ChatGPT, and they do what are called simulated brute force attacks. And that means is we're going to use a computer to guess your password. They have found now that using ChatGPT, they can correctly guess any 8-digit alphanumeric password. It says uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers, letters, etc. in less than 1 second.
Yeah,
So if you're using 8-digit passwords, don't bother.
So password spelled backwards is no good.
Probably not as good as you think. Yes.
Okay. So we got to go to how long a password?
18 digits is 79 billion years. We recommend 20 to 25. And they've got to be randomly generated and unique. In other words, you could have this great password. We use it on more than one account. That account gets breached. You've compromised everything you've done.
So what's the password manager you'd recommend?
We recommend Keeper. We diligence about 100 different providers. Some of these companies are backed by entities,
Chinese-owned,
Iranian, North Korean, and you're not sure what's going to happen. But also, some of these organizations, a big profit item for them is taking information and selling it. And that you're trying to avoid that. This is not the purpose of having it.
Right.
So we like Keeper because our average client age is like 70, and our ability to use it's so easy and simple for the client to use. If they want to change passwords, they can do that, et cetera, et cetera. Very easy.
How about the VPN? What VPN would you recommend?
We recommend Surfshark. It's a British Virgin Islands company. Has some operations in, I think it's Latvia. Some of their guys work there. Some of the technicians. It has a pause button, which is great because when you start having trouble connecting to a site, you push a pause button. It'll turn off for a couple of minutes and then come right back on. So you're shielded. And then we also recommend using private email. We use a Canadian company called OpenSRS. It doesn't replace your daily use email. Use this for account authentication, so someone can't get into your email and start changing your passwords.
So it's not just data breaches or phishing; it's much deeper than that. So thanks for clarifying.
Much more. And this, I think the smartest guy in this industry is Peter Maluk, and Peter texted me once saying, "This will be the big issue in the next 12 to 18 months."
So for advisors who are thinking about how do we expand services, we should add tax planning services or tax mitigation, estate and trust, maybe risk management products. Cyber is a big risk too. Think about that.
Enormous.
Okay, super. Mark, it's always great to catch up with you. Thanks for the quick chat this month. And thanks for everybody for tuning into this episode. We'll look forward to catching up next month.
Thank you.